invariably we come upon what are called tragic moral choices. That is, situations in which we're seemingly faced with choosing either one sinful action or another sinful action. Ethics textbooks and discussions often come up with these. For example, you have 10 people in a lifeboat. There's enough food in the lifeboat for 6 people. So if you throw 4 people overboard, you save the 6. If you don't kill 4 of them, everybody's going to die. But what about real life? The classic modern example is Germans hiding Jews from the Nazis. The Nazis come to your door and ask if you have any Jews in your house. If you tell the truth, the Jews are taken out and killed. If you lie, their lives are saved, but you've lied. This even happens in the Bible. Most people know about the story of Rahab the harlot in Joshua. The spies came to her and she hid them on her roof. When the authorities came and asked her about them, she lied and said they had left. Earlier than that, there were the Hebrew midwives in the book of Exodus. Pharaoh had ordered them to kill all Hebrew boys. They wouldn't do it. When Pharaoh asked them about it, they made up a story about how Jewish women give birth too quickly. Then there's the story of Samuel. This is a little bit less familiar in 1 Samuel 16. Samuel was told to go and anoint David to be a successor to King Saul. After Saul's rebellion, God had chosen David to be the next king. So God tells Samuel, go and anoint David. And Samuel says, well, if I do that, Saul will kill me. So God says, okay, I'll tell you what. You take an animal and tell Saul that you're going to offer sacrifice. Well, Samuel did offer sacrifice, but this was just a cover-up for the real plan, which was to anoint David. And so he was seeking to deceive Saul. If he told Saul the truth, Samuel would have been killed. If he deceived Saul, he would live. So, these are the situations we face. Are there times when our only option is to commit a sin, to violate some commandment? Do we have to make choices between what are called the lesser of two evils? Now note this verse, though, 1 Corinthians 10:13, that we looked at earlier. No temptation has overtaken you, but such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but he will also make a way of escape. So, we've seen that God is in control of our circumstances, and he's promised he will make a way of escape. That is, a way not to fall into temptation, or a way not to sin. That choice is always there. It might not be easy to see. It might not be easy to follow. It might be a difficult choice to make. But the verse says there is going to be a choice that does not involve sin. Now, this verse, though, is even more critical for our thinking. Hebrews 4:15, we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but was in all points tempted as we are, yet without sin. Now, Jesus never committed any sin, and this verse says he was tempted in every way that we are tempted. So, if there are times we face a situation when our only choices involve sin, then Jesus must have been tempted that way as well. But if that's the case, then Jesus would have sinned. Even if it was the lesser of two evils, it would have still been a sin. If he wasn't tempted in that way, then he wasn't tempted in every way we are tempted. People who were hiding the Jews in Nazi Germany could have said, well, yeah, Jesus was tempted in a lot of ways, but he was never tempted this way, to where he had to choose between turning somebody over to death or lying. But no, the Bible says Jesus was tempted in every way that we are, in all points tempted as we are. So what we have to conclude then is that there is never a time when we are forced to sin, when our only choices involve sin, because Jesus was able to live a life without sin. So let's look at our examples again. Okay, first, our lifeboat situation. Now, okay, it's theoretically possible that this could happen, but I tend to think this is just a hypothetical situation. Okay, think about this, consider this video anyway.
Let me ask you a question. Say there's a runaway train. It's hurtling out of control towards 10 people standing in the middle of the tracks. Only way to save those people is to flip a switch, send the train down another set of tracks. The only problem is, there is a baby in the middle of those tracks.
Why would anyone leave a baby in harm's way like that?
Well, I don't know. It's not the point. It's an ethical dilemma. Look, Katie Brown brought it up over dinner the other night. Question is it appropriate to divert the train and kill the one baby to save the 10 people?
Wouldn't the people just see the train coming and move?
No, they wouldn't see it.
Why not?
Well, look, I don't know. Say they're blind.
All of them?
Yes, all of them.
Then why don't you just call out and tell them to move out of the way?
Because they can't hear you.
But they're deaf, too? How fast is the train going?
But the speed doesn't matter.
Well, sure it does. If it's going slow enough, you could outrun it and shove everyone to the side.
Or better yet, go get the baby.
I was just trying to...
Rodney?
Yes, go ahead.
Now, men can always dream up circumstances that would never happen in real life. Okay, God doesn't promise to get us out of any hypothetical situation. He promises to govern our actual situations, so there will be a way out. He is not going to put us in a situation that requires sin. That's 1 Corinthians 10:13. Okay, there's always going to be some way out. Okay. I mean, even if it's a matter of saying, well, I'm going to sacrifice myself for the good of others. Okay, maybe I am the one who jumps overboard from the lifeboat to at least help the others to live longer, or something like that. So, now let's group the situations of the Jews and Rahab and the Hebrew midwives together, because they all involve a choice between turning someone over to death or lying. Now, let's think about what the 9th commandment actually says. We'll talk about this more later, but it says, "You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor." You see, the focus is on courtroom settings. You're not to be a false witness in a court of law, not bringing false charges against someone. In none of these cases, with the Jews or Rahab or the Hebrew midwives, in none of these cases was that happening. They weren't in a court of law. And the word against helps us. None of these three were harming anyone. They weren't lying in order to convict somebody. And in all three cases, it was actually the other party who was seeking to harm someone. It was the Nazis or the soldiers at Jericho or Pharaoh. They were acting immorally and seeking to harm innocent people. Notice in Hebrews 11 and James 2:25 that Rahab's actions are praised. James 2:25 praises her for sending the soldiers out another way. Well, what's the other way? It must be another way, a different way than what she had told the soldiers. Now, even more importantly, consider Exodus 1:20, which is right after the situation, right after Scripture records the deception of the midwives, after it talks about how they lied to Pharaoh. It says, "Therefore God dealt well with the midwives." In Hebrew, that word "therefore" is important. It intimately connects the next phrase, God dealt well with the midwives. It directly connects that with what happened immediately before that, which was that they deceived Pharaoh. Okay, those two are connected in the Hebrew. Precisely because they deceived Pharaoh, God blessed them. Now, think about the situation with Samuel and Saul. God himself told Samuel to deceive Saul. Now, we might say that technically what Samuel said was the truth. After all, what it says is, okay, well, you take a sacrifice, you take an animal and you sacrifice as you go. And so technically, okay, he told the truth that he was going to sacrifice. But every scholar of ethics will tell you that using partial truth to conceal something else is still a lie. Let's think about this, okay, in a classroom situation. You think a student cheated on his homework. and he copied somebody else's homework. So you ask him about it, and he says, I did my work. I worked out of the textbook. I had that book open as I was working. Okay, maybe he really did have his book open, but his friend's homework was there next to the book, and he copied his friend's homework. Now, what he said was technically true. He had the book open, and he was working out of the book. But his covering up the fact that he had his friend's work there too makes his statement a deception. It was a lie. Well, that's what God told Samuel to do, to tell a partial truth, to cover up what he was really there to do. But since God told Samuel to do it, it cannot be wrong. Now, I think what we have to see here is that the 9th commandment doesn't require that we always tell the entire truth in every situation. There are times, it's rare, but there are times when someone has lost their right to hear the truth. I think that's the case with the Nazis, with Pharaoh. Due to their sin, they've lost that right, and it's right to deceive them. By the way, that's also what happens in war situations. One army is seeking to deceive the other about their intentions. And I don't believe that's a violation of the 9th commandment, since that would be sin. If we understand the 9th commandment properly, then that would not be sin to do. It's the same way that killing someone in self-defense is not a violation of the 6th commandment. If we understand the 6th commandment properly, we know that killing someone in self-defense isn't a violation of that commandment, so it's not a sin. Now, I think these situations that we're talking about here are very rare. They're not situations we face on an everyday basis. So we can't use this as an excuse for wholesale deception and lying. But if they do happen, you're not being forced to sin. It's not a matter of choosing the lesser of two evils, because the lesser of two evils is still evil. You're never forced to sin. There's always a choice which does not involve sin. Now, in the next video, we're going to consider what our biblical goals should be. But for now, in the discussion board, this issue of tragic moral choice is something that can easily lend itself to further discussion, and I know Christians have different views on this. So please enter at least one comment with your thoughts about this, and respond to others who've contributed. But remember to keep your comments within the bounds of Christian charity. Thank you.